I am Aditya. I would start with today's session. Node is majorly a server. Let's get started and discuss. So, what we have in the day, what we plan to cover for the day is our Node.js. What is a server? Now, server is a confusing term in itself. Does it make sense? Like because if I go to a data center and I look for a server is a machine basically which is having very high power, right? So what is the difference between a Node.js and an actual server, guys? Okay, let me do it like this. So since all of you are saying that Node.js is a server, let me go to amazon.com and see a server. So we see a machine like this, which is having 16 gigabyte of RAM, a very high hard disk, a very good processor. Such machines are termed as server, correct? So if these are server, then what actually is node? Is node something like a server? See, why it is important for us to understand this is because we are often confused between a server, a machine which runs a server, and a client. So, this is what we will be covering for the day. We would be going through the basics of Node, understanding about the server, understanding about the Node.js. How do I set up my Node server? Then we will be moving ahead with some basics of API, some basics of REST API, and would be going beyond the node routes and helping to create some of the servers. Now, what is Node.js? Node.js is an open source and cross-platform JavaScript runtime environment. I hope most of you have learned JavaScript by now. So you have some familiarity with JavaScript. Let us go to a whiteboard and see our some basics. Okay. Now, I go over here and this is my browser. In the browser, I type a code console.log. Now the console here means printing, log means print to the console in browser. So where are all these properties defined? So now what needs to be done is when you write to console. So basically what happens is, so console is a definition which I'm defined that yes, whenever something like this comes, you are supposed to print it to the browser, right? So having around all these definitions, how are these definitions written for me? In order to have these definitions controlled, I need a compiler or an interpreter which can help me read these languages. So what I do is I create a runtime environment like this, which can hold all my definition. I deploy this runtime environment onto a server, which can then help me to answer my requests in a way as if these were JavaScript requests. So what is Node? Node is an open source and cross-platform. Now, what do you mean by the word cross-platform? So what happens is, guys, when you are running a browser or when you are running a application or language, your application can run in any platform. Now, think like this. Think like this. Now, imagine this machine could be a Windows machine, right? Now, in order to run this on a say a Linux machine, if I need to have a separate piece of code, it means I need to maintain multiple codes, right? Which is again a bad practice for me. So what Node gives me? It gives me the cross-platform ability to run the JavaScript environment. So just to reiterate, what is a Node? Node is a JavaScript runtime environment which is open source in nature. Perfect. Now, internally, so this is the definition of node, but what it actually has internally is known as a V8 JavaScript engine. Now, consider this website. Right now, what is this website all about? This is a site which is running JavaScript. Now, since in today's world, most of the websites are running JavaScript, so the current engine being used in JavaScript is termed as the V8 JavaScript engine, which is the same engine which is the core of Google Chrome, and this allows the node to be very performant. Right, so we all know that Chrome is one of the most powerful browser for the world nowadays, due to which we allow it to be used in Node, hence making it pretty much powerful. And at the same time, what is JavaScript engine? Okay, let me explain you. Now, imagine this console.log. There is, so while you are running a JavaScript inside this environment, right, there has to be an engine or there has to be some part of the code which would interpret this code. So basically, so engine is nothing but the powerhouse of the all the libraries which are powering my JavaScript code. So consider it like think of it like a Java version. So like we have multiple JavaScript engines coming on. So we have right now we are running V8. Prior to this, there were some other engines. Now, why is V8 very popular? Because V8 is based on the Chromium kit, which is the same one which is being used inside my Chrome browser. Now, how does a typical Node application works? The Node application runs as a single process. So what do you mean by a single process? If you are sending a request, each time a new request is triggered, that doesn't lead to creation of a new thread, which means the Node application works as a this means that the Node application works as a single process inside the whole system. Now, it is a single thread which is running inside my whole system. But what actually is, so this is my definition for the basic working of Node. So now what you mean is, so if you hit google.com, so the server which is powering the browser or the server which is powering my server request will have a single process to take care of all my requests. But there is one very good thing in Node, which is the asynchronous capabilities which it has. Now, what do you mean by asynchronous? Let me show this thing to you, what this actually means. Let's go to google.com. Now, if you go to inspect element and if you go to network tab, now you see that all these requests which are coming in, all these requests are, see, so these requests are coming in at a specific amount of time. Not all of the requests are coming at the same time. See, this request came and then it waited for another request and so on henceforth. So what this means is these requests are non-sequential in nature. So what do you mean by non-sequential? These are asynchronous in nature. So once a request is triggered to the server, the request will be answered when it is available to be answered. Asynchronous means it will not wait for each request to be answered before it can go on to the another request. I'm trying to help you understand all these terminologies in the real working way. Now, why is it so important? It is important because if these requests were blocking in nature, my page would have been blocked and user would not have been able to interact. So what is the problem if user is not able to interact? Now, if the user is not able to interact, that means that the website is rendering not in a proper manner. Hence, so either you find that loading options, and that kind of irritates the user, and user eventually goes out of the website, not visiting the website ever in the future. So considering this thing in mind, it is expected that the application or the JavaScript engine, whichever is running, should allow asynchronous requests so that the operations are non-blocking in nature. Now, that is one advantage. There is another advantage to it. Let me jump back to my Google Chrome and see. If I go to Google over here and okay, over here itself. Now, imagine this is a request in which I am trying to fetch some data for a specific user. So while I am trying to fetch this data, another thing which is very advantageous is if this request is supposed to hit a database, then in the meantime, the request is going on to the database. The node server can free itself and take others' request. Now, so what it means when Node is performing an IO like reading network accessing, instead of blocking the thread and wasting the CPU cycle, Node will resume the operation when the response comes back. So again, what it means is now I am not waiting for the whole system to be stuck. Now, what I am waiting for the whole machine is now the power of Node is I am just waiting for my systems, and whenever I get a response from them, I continue with my execution without having to wait or without having to resume the whole thing. So CPU cycles are not wasted. So what is the advantage? Since CPU cycles are not wasted, a small server can resemble that it is a very powerful server because the CPU is switched in a very fast manner, hence allowing me to have multitasking and multiprocessing at the same time. Node is a single thread. There are different ways of achieving multi-threading. The first way is each request is a new thread. That is one way of achieving multi-threading. The second way is whenever a request comes, the thread line is one. That thread line will be always empty, and it whenever a IO request is going on, that thread will be available for my other request to be responded on. You have to understand it like like pipes a system. Say you are watering your plants, right? So when you have 10 plants and you feel that okay, this plant needs some more care, so while you are spending time on that plant, what you do is you don't let that water either go down the drain, or you don't let that water waste. You give that water to other plants and you spend your time on your previous plant to give it manure or whatever you wish to do. So consider it like as a pipe system. Does this make sense? Now, so imagine this is my server. One of the requests I get from my server is like this. Right now, for this request, I need to go to my database to pull out some value. So while this operation is going on, this request engine is still available. So it will, in the meantime, take the another request. Now, once this request is answered, it will come back and will be responded back. Does this make sense? So the CPU cycle is not wasted. The thread line is one. The thread line is one, which means it's a single thread. Now, in order to have but nowadays with millions of people accessing the website, how do we allow multiple people accessing? For that, we set up multiple of the data, multiple of the servers. I'll come to that part a bit later. Now, moving on. So we have understood what is Node. Node is very much clear to me that what is Node? It's a it's a runtime environment which runs on a server. But I need to now understand what is a server then. See, problem with our computer world is that people have been using these words interchangeably. So it's very important for you to understand like which is what. So if you recall from my last explanation, let me draw out a diagram for you. So this is a server. So now how do I define a server? I define this as a server saying that this is a Intel Xenon processor which has say 64 gigabytes of RAM and say 1024 gigabytes of hard disk. Now, this is a server, right? Now, people will say, but then what is Node? Now, this server is a hardware system. So, first of all, the very simple definition of server is that a very high computation machine which can answer your request is a server. It is high computation in nature. Now, what we do is, I know that this is a high computation machine. What I'll do is, out of this server, I will dedicate one of its port for Node, one of its port for MongoDB, and one of its port for say some other action. Does it make sense? So this now, if it's Node, so what is this? Now, on this server, I have deployed a Node.js server and it is running on a specific port. So what it means is whenever say that imagine that the name of this server is something like this. Say the name is Eduonix.com, the name of server. So if I have to call node, I will pass the full name of the server, Eduonix.com colon 3000, which means that this request will now go to the node server. Make sense, guys? Are you able to follow now? So what is node, what is server, what is what now? Now on this, imagine this is my Mongo database, a Mongo server. This is the Mongo server. So now when I call Eduonix.com colon 27017, this means that this request will go down to the Mongo database. So now you have to understand, what you have to understand is a server is a powerful machine which can run multiple of events at once, right? Say that it has 64 cores. Now out of 64 cores, this node will utilize some, this Mongo will utilize some, and this IIS will utilize some. Now, in order to run this application, or in order to run my what you say as my request, so this is a server, right? Now when you go to market to buy a server, you will get a blank server of like this type. On this server, like if it's a now if you are installing a Windows OS, so Windows OS comes with a predefined web server which is named as IIS, correct? If it's a Linux server, you can have something as LAMP. So all these are different types. All these are different types. And so in typical terms, this is a hardware server, and the ones like this, the IIS and these are termed as web server. We have something like WebLogic, which is termed as a application server. Correct, guys? Maybe specify at the port. Yes. So basically now what happens is, I think this is a very good point. What is happening is they are asking that what is this port? Now all these servers are binded to the outer world on the basis of port. Now imagine I am in a webinar right now. I say I have to call Akshay. How do I call Akshay, right? Like imagine there are five Akshay. How would I call the specific Akshay? I would either have his ID, I would either use his name, I would use his full name, and such things are known as the fully qualified name. And on a server, everything is binded to a port on which your server will run. Correct, guys? Does it make sense? Now, let me read out loud. A server is a computer which provides data. Web server can be something like Apache HTTP or the Microsoft IIS, which provides access to the website over the internet. So we have understood what is a hardware server. So now let's say that like we are developers now. We will not call our node as server. We will call it the server app. So in this example now, we will be talking about how do I actually create my server app. So whenever you have to create a server app, so now tell me this thing, okay. Now when I'm calling google.com, I'm not mentioning the port over here. Recall the diagram which I was talking about. How is this directed to the exact port on which this Google is listening? Whenever you are triggering an HTTP request, wait, let me draw this diagram first. I go to a website, something like this. This is my web server, a very powerful machine, something like Intel Xenon processor. But on this one, there are different ports available for each one of these. So like say this is for port number 80. This is for port number say 8080, port number 443, and port number 8085. Now till the time you tell which port should I forward my request to, the web server will not understand it, because ultimately this hardware machine which will take this request, and it has a table where it maintains where this 80 request goes to. Does it make sense? So for the purpose of that illustration, there are some ground rules for it. What is the ground rule? The ground rule says that all the default HTTP request goes to port number 80. All the HTTPS request goes to 443. Does this make sense now? So when you say google.com, typing this google.com is exactly similar as saying go to google.com colon 443. Let me show it to you. Arun, it's not about .com. It's not the dot which is over here. It is this thing which determines. HTTPS means that the request will go to 443. If I make it HTTP, so if I make it HTTP, then this request will go to port number 80 now. Does this make sense, guys? Guys, what is important? See, as a developer, anyone can learn coding. What is very important for the people who are learning mean or are full stack developer is they should have the full stack knowledge. Then only you can say you have, yes, I'm a full stack developer, right? Learning languages and coding is not difficult. What is important is to have the knowledge from the starting to the ending of the stack, which can help you create your complete applications. So now what I say is, now I am writing a code which says that the first thing is create a HTTP on this host name, take the property from the environment variable, and on the HTTP, call the function create server. I think either that is 20. Yes, I think FTP is 21, correct. Like FTP is 21, SMTP is something I think 19 or 90. So there are a full range of all the IPs over here. Let me give you an example. Let's say I want to go to Eduonix.com. Now, you see that I typed in Eduonix.com, but I was automatically taken to HTTPS. So what has happened is very recently, Google has started requesting websites to use HTTP. So what happens is when you forward a request to HTTP, that request is automatically transferred to HTTPS. Does it make sense? So on your DNS, there's a small setting which is done, which goes by the name of force HTTPS. This is a variable. You enable this, and this is a small mechanism which will do it. This is not with browser. This is with the website. See, I'm the website owner. I only want people to use my website on HTTPS. Then I can do it. See, think like this. If I have some people who are running on my HTTP, right, then what could potentially happen is there could be some things where my data could be compromised. I don't want that. So what I do is I make sure all the people are using a redirection or are forwarding a request on HTTPS every time a request comes. So now we were on this particular part and I go to present. So what it says is now the the first part of the code is to include the HTTP module. So what is HTTP? HTTP is a module which is having the functions to. So what is HTTP module? It's a library which is used for networking. Now it has a create server method which creates a new server and returns it. Now, what do you mean by returning? By returning, it means is now the machine is listening to this server, and whenever a request comes on the specific port, a callback method is initiated, which can help user to answer the request. A module is a predefined code which is available. You don't need to. You just need to import and get started. It will not create a server once you use HTTP. So once you create a server over here, so this function will create a server and will be saved over here on this variable. So whenever the next time a request comes onto this server on this host name and this port, the next time when a request comes, this callback will actually call this back and the request will be answered. So this is a listening method. If you see over here, this is listening. Now, what do you mean by listen? It will always listen till the time you close it. So you will have to close the server when you don't want the server to listen now. We are not adding a server. So this create method is automatically having this capability. I'm not adding this thing. When you say create, it will take a request, will give back a response. It will automatically do it. I'm not supposed to do any changes. So now see, this is how a code looks like. You have a create server. Sorry, you have a create server. So this now server is created. So what you are doing is you are saying that this server, whatever request it gets in the response, pass this status code, pass this header, and pass this end. So now this part of the code is done. So now my server is created. Now my server is created. Now, but if you see or if you recall from my previous example, so right now I'm not binding anything, right? There is no binding which is done. I bind the server over here. So what I say, server.listen on this port, on this host, and whenever a console comes, wait, let me help you with an example. So this is how it will work. So I have this server on this port. Right now, say the port is 8080, or let's say 8080. So on this port now, I have set up a server. So what I do is I create a method which is server.listen. So this method is now binded to this request. So whenever a request comes, this server will listen. But the server is now aware that whenever a request is coming, it is supposed to answer a request using this method. So the listen command is to set up the server and to set it running. And this is how the request will be answered for the user. Now, once this is done, you will simply say node app.js and your server is now started. So I am creating in my Node.js intro, I am creating a new directory. I name it mkdir and I say server project. I say cd server project and I say npm init. This is not a console, guys. This is a normal terminal window. So you can go to the directory where you want to. No, this is a terminal. So like in your use case, in your system, you can have you would have something like cmd or a command prompt. It is something like that. Don't worry, I'll come up with the setup. Don't worry about that. First, guys, follow what I'm doing. Then you will be in a better position to understand. And I would say Node.js intro open. So now what I've got is I have got my server project. Now on this project, I create a new file, which is app.js. So what was in my file? The first part of the file was constant HTTP. What is constant HTTP? It is nothing but require the HTTP library. Post that, I define a constant host name. Sorry. Once I have the host name, I define the port. Now, what I do is, if you recall, I am supposed to create a new server. So constant server is equal to http dot create server. And over here, I have a request and a response. Now, what is so request is what I am receiving, and the response is what I am sending back to the user. The response is 2000 is 200. The header which I am setting now, what is header? Header tells what is the type of data or the content you will be sending. And then I say rs dot and I simply type a message, hello world, from a live server. Correct, guys? So I have created the server, I have created everything, but I need to now listen to this server. No, so in Node, use of semicolon is not mandatory. So I say listen. You are supposed to listen on a port and a host name and accept some parameters, which is again optional. And over here, you are supposed to say console.log. So server is running at. Now where it is running? HTTP colon double slash the host name, and after the host name goes the port. This is the very basic and the minimalistic No, you can use any port. Don't worry about the port. Node is very flexible. The port should be free. That is the only requirement. And you can use any port. So what I need to do is now, I need to go to my server project. I need to say node app.js. So what it says is server is running. So this is the listening mode, and this is the terminal window which is available to listen. Now, as soon as I pick this up and I go to my browser like this, you see that this is hello world from the live server. Now let's say port is, so if the port is busy, like let's say it would give you an error and the server won't start. Let me show that to you. So it says address is already in use. And why is it in use? Because this server is already running. Yes. So when I run this, when I say node app.js, it is running till level I do it. No, but if I would change this port, then this file would be changed right directly. So it won't work. I say 3400. I have changed it. I would first close it. I would then say, so see that now the port is changed. So now if I go to 3300, it would not return me a request. If I go to 34, it will give me a request. That is known as, there is a way of doing it. So what you can do is you can start this node app.js as a background service. There's a way to do it. Don't worry about that. So on servers, like this is a development machine. That's why I'm doing it like this. But on your local machines, you can do something like that. Not a problem. Now see, say if I want to change and I say hello world or I say Aditya. Now the problem with this is, so whenever I save it, I have to close my server and restart. Correct? Now this is a huge problem. Why a problem? Because I so this is a huge problem. Why? Because I have to kind of constantly reinitiate a request. So yes, Serge, that's exactly correct. So now what you can do is, if you don't want to wait or don't want to close your server and you want to deploy the changes directly, so what you would say is you would say npm install nodemon. So nodemon is a yes, Lewis, that's absolutely correct. Let me first take you guys to nodemon. Yeah. So what is nodemon? It's a tool which is in node.js to automatically restart whenever a change is coming in. See, this is only for development and it is not recommended to use it for the production. So this is my nodemon dependency. So now what I would say is I would say nodemon. Okay, sorry. Node packages. Now, as soon as I change it, see, it was refreshing it. So the request has been refreshed. Let's try to hit this. No, it's not changing. Okay, just give me a second. I will have to change one file. Sorry. Yeah. So what I need to do is I need to make a small change over here. In the server, I need to say that server is nodemon app.js. I don't need the test casing part. I think this should work now. Let me see. Okay, just give me a second, guys. Let me see why it is not doing it. This one is perfectly fine. The main is app.js, okay, and the script file, this is my server. This one should work. Just give me a second, guys. Let me see why it is behaving like this. Okay, it is running over here. Okay, let me change it. No, it's not taking up the changes automatically. But this is how it is supposed to, I think. So Arun, what is there is for production, whenever a code change happens, you are supposed to trigger a whole request and a whole cycle is to be followed. It's not that you would like to restart a server. So like when you take a production downtime, you first make the changes, then you like check the changes and then you deploy. It's not a thing like you save it and it should restart. That's not a good practice. With or without downtime is something which is different. It is completely like the call of the client. But what is requested is that it should take proper time. It's not that like the developer is saving on his machine and the changes are there. It is saying, see, with this it is working fine, but not with the, yeah. So now if I change it over here, it will take up the change. See, it is automatically deploying. See, it is working with nodemon, but I'm not sure. I think with the terminal there is some issue which the small mistake which is happening. See, if you refresh it, I have not restarted it, but the change is deployed. Now, what is requested or what you require to use it? So just to get started with this particular part, you need to make sure that you have Node installed. So you will have to download Node, and from there you can do this part of the code. See, this is like whenever a new request comes up, so this the ID which you are using is very powerful. So you see that so the app.js is running inside a nodemon, which is running as a node process, right? So I would close my debugger and then we will continue with my other parts of the demo. When to use? So you use node when you are like running an application, like you are using a MERN stack or something of that sort. I will move ahead further. So now, what is an API? So what happens is, now Node is a server, right? Now, why we use servers? Nowadays, we use server to take request. But what has happened is, so there was a time when there were only web applications, and there was no need. There was the entire code could reside inside my web apps. But with nowadays, with mobile apps and so many things into picture, it is not possible that you just survive around with one application. You need multiple clients to answer or to take down the client request. So for that, now see, Android application is built in Java, iOS is built in Swift, and a mobile application is built in Merl. So what you do is, so now you have a process where you kind of create APIs which actually take the request, and you use endpoints to transfer the data. That is termed as an API. So what is an API? An API is the process of sending a request, and based on that request, answer is triggered. And API are of two types: REST APIs and SOAP APIs. So, what is a REST API? REST determines how a API looks like. Representational state transfer. So, what it means is, when you create an API, that API is not maintaining any state for you. So whenever you call a URL, like for example, I fire this URL, this is known as a REST request being triggered, and I get a response. This is termed as my response. Correct? So the URL being called is a request, and the data being transferred is known as a response. Now, what does API consist of? API will have typically four types or four parts. The endpoint. Now, what is the endpoint? This is my endpoint. The next is the method. So, what is a method? Like what will the API do? Will it get some data? Will it post some data? And all such things. Then the next is the header, and then the data or the body. Let's see all these things one by one. So what is an endpoint? Like the API for, this is an API which you can use to get GitHub data. So see, like say that, okay, imagine there is a GitHub user, something like this. So this is a user whose API is called over here. So all these API endpoints are available and you can easily view them. So like for this user, if you have to view what this user is, for to which organization this user is working, so you will use this, right? Now if you want to see the followers of this user, you can view it over here. To view all the repos, you will simply pass a command like this, correct? So all of these are my API endpoints. So API endpoints are something very similar to my website URL. And now, whenever you have a column, let me take you to it like through like this, GitHub API. So whenever there is a column pointed out, just let me just pull down the references here. So over here now, this is for a slash user to get a user. So whenever you are calling an API, like this is a get request. Once the status is 200, such type of messages send out. So all such things are termed as this is a API endpoint. Now to get a specific user, you will have to pass a username over here, something like this or something like this. These are known as colon indentations, or what it means is you can pass any data or you can pass any variable. So any colons on the part denote that a variable can be there. Like for example, colon username. Now, what are the methods? Methods can be like get, post, put, patch, and delete. The method names are self-explanatory, nothing new in them. Get is used to get data. To push data, you use post. For update, you use update. For patching, you use patch. And for delete, you use delete. Put is used for update, guys. So get is for get, post is to post, put or patch. Put is to put, and patch is for update. Yeah, I'm telling you. So like imagine, like say you are updating some parts. Like you have a user field, right? And you are just updating, say, the user ID. Sorry, the user email address. Such things go inside put or patch. So these are basically used as an update operation. So entire resource means, imagine like I have a user, right? And when I'm updating the whole user, like many a times what people do is, so even if they're updating a single field, they will replace the whole document or the whole data. That is said by the entire resource. And when you update a very specific field, like say user email, user phone number, that is known as updating a specific field. Now, what are headers? So, what are headers? Basically, headers basically tell what data will it, well, what data will my API serve. Like it will tell you the content type, it will tell you the resource type, it will tell you any authentication which is there. Basically, headers are nothing but my key value pair, which are stored inside my, which are provided inside my API. Those are termed as header. Now, what is the next thing is response status. Now, what happens is when you are triggering a request, you need to understand what has happened to my request. Is my request okay? Was there some error? Was the server available? So all those is termed, or it comes using the response status. So status varies from 100 to 500 plus, like something like 200, 201, 200 means okay, 202 means okay, but not having enough credits. Then there could be one which could mean that the authentication was not there. Such error messages help the developers to understand how the request behaved. Now, these are only used for the purpose of debugging and for the purpose of creating a UI which should be able to handle the errors. These are all the requests. 200 means success, 300 means redirection, 400 means error from client, and 500 means error from the server. So if you can recall, if you let's go to the code. If you recall over here, this was my response. The response is having code. This is my header, and this is my response data. So this is what we did, was also a kind of a API. Now, for the purpose of API, we use something as Express, which is a good medium to use API. We will be seeing that. So this is like a sample REST API. So let us go and do something like this. What I will do is I will simply copy and duplicate this one. Let me comment out this part of the code, and let me get started with my own code over here. Now, what I need to do is I need to go to my code and I need to say npm install express. And then I say node app.js. Let me change the port over here. It is saying that error is in use. Okay. So this is now what I am doing over here is I am saying app.get. Now what is get? Get is a method on the slash, which means the the URL, the request and the response, and in the response send back a hi. Now then I'm saying app.listen, listen to this request on the port 3200 and give me this response. We are using Express for our APIs. Actually, Express, so that is what MERN is, right? So MERN is, what is MERN or what is mean? Mean is about Express and Node. So APIs are always in Express. That's why we are using Express. It is not able to start this. Let me. A node is more or less like server. So this part of the code is done by node, but this API, this get method, this send method, all these are done by the Express only. If you don't use Express, you won't be able to have these things done in a proper manner. Then you won't have the get method. All these methods are available on the Express library. Okay, let me open this, add folders to the workspace, rest example. So this is my REST project. I need to create a new file. So sorry. So you see over here, now the message was server ready, and I see over here server ready. So what I would go over here is I would go to my server, my browser, and I would trigger a request and I get the messages hi. Correct, guys? So this is my app, this is my API get. I get some data and this is I on the port, and when I trigger it request, I get the response. So what it expresses is think like this. Now, let me refresh this page for you guys. Now, so now I have a end machine, and now on this server, I have a request coming in. Now, once a request comes to this server, it is very important that I should be able to read this request. So Node will just carry this request for me, but I need to be able to interact with the backend, interact with database. For all that, I need a backend language, something like Java. That is what Express is. This is the actual mean stack available. So now the client, which is a browser, will make a request which would be done in Angular. Angular will then send the request to the Node.js, which will just handle the request. But this node will be using Express to parse the request. So when you go to GitHub and you say fetch me this user, how this user reaches the database? This is all possible because of this Express. So this Express will then go and check, like, do I need to fetch the database? If it does, it fetches the database and then it returns back the response to Node, the Express, which then sends the request back to the client, which then displays it, and then it is seen by the client. So this is the entire mean stack available for you. So now, so when you so the server is created automatically. So this get, that is what Express is doing for us. So all that thing like creating server and all those is managed by Express on its own. We just say where do we want to listen to the server. Angular is more of like a component driven, and React is more or less like a framework. So React is a bit easier to get started with. So if the port on Express is very similar to port on Node. There's no difference. You can give any port you want. Now let's try to move ahead with what we have. Now let's guys kind of try to create some really good APIs. So we will see that. So what we do is we say Express, we say app over here. Now let us try to create some APIs in our example. So what I'm saying, express.json. What this will do, this will allow me to convert the parts, the requests which are coming in JSON. So I create constant sports. Sports is an array which is having a title and an ID. Oh, sorry. A title and a ID. So I have football, the ID is 2, and let's say I have hockey, the ID is 3. Now, I have the first API, which is saying something like this, that APIs have been deployed. Now, let us try to create a API which can give me all these sports. So, /sports. Now, over here, I simply send back this sports variable. Now let us try to get a specific sport. So how will I get this sport? I would first define. So I say constant sport. So what is sport? Sport is equal to sports dot find. Since it's an array, I can find values. I would say I'm just taking a random number which is ID. Now what is ID? I say c dot ID is equal to parse it from the URL. So how do I parse it? I pass it that it is a request dot params dot ID. So the ID is coming, the ID is captured over here. Now I have got the sport. Now what I do is, if there is no sport like this, I send back a status, and I send a error message which goes like this. A H2 message which says now. Otherwise, if it is not like that, I would simply return back my, and then I simply say res.send, send the sport back. Let us first try these 2-3 APIs. I would close my server. I would start my server. APIs have been deployed /API/sports. I get all the sports, and if I pass 1, I get only the cricket. If I pass 100, I get an error saying that sports not found. So this is how your API should look like. Now let us try to create one more API which will be used to create a new sport, right? So I say app.post. The endpoint of this will still be the same. Now, guys, mind this thing. The benefit of changing this method is that even if I keep the same endpoint, my API will still respond back because the type is same. Because sorry, the type is different. Now, what you can do is you can check for some errors. We will skip the error check. Let us try to create a new sport which is equal to something like this. What is ID? ID is sports dot length plus 1. And what is the title? Title is equal to request dot body dot title. So I've got the sport coming in. Now once I get the sport, I just need to push it. So I say sports dot push the sport which is just created, and then result dot send the sport. Now you can apply validation to check, like if the title name, if the title name is repeated, then you can apply some validation to check, like is it containing at least 10 characters. Okay, let me do it like this. Let me remove it. Let me first get my URL and let me close the server and start again. Where it gave an error, just a second. Title is equal to line number 28. Yeah, this is right? This is the request. Okay, got it. Okay, let's try to run this now. The server is ready. I will paste it. Yeah, I got that now, guys. Thank you. I just need to pass in the body. I need to pass the title. Let's pass it as basketball. I don't need anything over here, and just need to send a request. It is not a put, it is a post request. So I've got the ID 4. Now, if I try to, let me try to fetch from the URL over here. The title is not pushed. Okay, let me see. So Postman is just a tool which is used to test the APIs. Parseint is not a package. It is so okay. When you say use JSON express.json, this is how it comes. URI means uniform resource informator, right? So when you say this is a URI. So these URI and all these are theoretical concepts, guys, actually. So, okay, let me show it to you. So now let us say that I fire this request 10 times. So what is happening? These requests are triggered multiple times, right? See, so it's not like that. So these requests are handled simultaneously on a server in one way. Now, what you mean by single thread is this one request is now, once it is triggered, it will stay there in the server. Now, while it is being processed, the CPU cycle is not awaited. See, if you remember, if you recall from here, what this part of the code, what this part said was that CPU cycle is not wasted. Node will resume the operation once it comes back.